Okay, so for this video, I'm going to kind of provide you with a little walkthrough for this first CAD practice, in which we'll make a little building and I'll walk you through some of the um, kind of good habits I would recommend that you get, I guess, for lack of a better word, in the habit of doing when you're using the software. And as it says in this assignment description, what you should kind of notice is that the same things that I recommended doing for hand drawings are also a very good idea to do when we're working in AutoCAD. It's just AutoCAD is a little faster and cleaner way of doing things. And so I'll just kind of go through each one of these and how you would work with them. And we'll go through making layers. Now with your big CAD assignment that you'll get next week, you actually are going to be provided a template file that will have layers already in it, but I still think it's important for you to know how to make layers because at some point you may need to make your own template or make your own new layers. And so it's good to know, exactly what that is and how it works. But what we're going to be doing is creating just a little floor plan and elevation. That'll be the minimum of the assignment. And then if for extra credit, if you're interested in, you can then go through and create any of the other elevation views and a section view even then too, to kind of get extra points. So maybe if you lost a lot of points from the hand drawing assignment, or maybe other progress assignments that you didn't turn in, which by the way, again, you can turn those in at any time for full credit. Turn those guided notes in, please. And yeah, we'll just kind of see AutoCAD in action. So I'm going to be going back and forth between AutoCAD and this drawing quite a bit, just as like a little reference. Also, you guys are not going to be required to add in any of these dimensions right now. That'll be a part of like as we go through AutoCAD and get more familiar with it. So you are just going to be creating the floor plan and the elevation. Pretty much where I get to at the end of this demo today is where I expect your project to kind of finish off as well. And this drawing will also is just included in your little packet of things that you're getting, just so you can see which layers are associated with which lines. So in architectural drawings, we rely really heavily on layers and we color code those layers, just because having different line weights in a complicated set of architectural plans, something that isn't a 10 by 10 shack, can be very overbearing. So having different colors is very helpful. If any of you are colorblind, I am very sorry, but if you are colorblind, please send me an email just so I know to make a note of that, because typically a lot of students will lose points on assignments for things like that, and I wouldn't want you to lose points if it's something completely out of your control. And if you're not colorblind, don't pretend you are, because then that's just kind of cool, and I don't think karma would have a lot of that. So, anywho, let's just jump into it. And so I have AutoCAD here. I just completely X'd out of what I was doing with the last demo, and I'm on a completely blank drawing. And so I'm just going to start a brand new drawing in a completely blank template. Some of the settings that I might have had from the last time I was working may have carried over. So for example, it carried over my polar tracking that I had it set at. It had my dynamic input over here. The object snaps that I might have chosen beforehand were carried over. But things like my units, or for instance, that grid in the background, those did not carry over. So I do have to set those up first. So the very first thing I'm going to do in this blank drawing is type in the command units, enter, and I'm going to change my units over to architectural. Again, with your big CAD assignment, I'm giving you a template file which will already have those units set. So it'll automatically be in architectural, but that's going to be my first step. and I'll click OK. And for this one, you know what? I'll leave the grid on in the background, just for fun. So now that I have my unit set, my next thing that I'm going to start to set up would be my layers. And so I'll go back into the assignment, and I'm actually just gonna, for this, I'm gonna scrunch that down a little bit. And I'll make it zoom to fit, and I'll scrunch it down just so I can have that there. And in AutoCAD, I'm gonna minimize it as well. I don't ever recommend using AutoCAD like this. I know a lot of students do because they like to have their reference drawing over on the side and then AutoCAD here. Personally, I would just have two on both my screens, but I want you guys to be able to see what I'm referring to. And I'm going to make new layers. So with AutoCAD full screen, my layers would be right up here. In the Mac version, your layers are in this big kind of menu over here on the side. And again, I'll find a good video about layers on the Mac version, and I'll link that in the description, so that way those of you using the Mac version can hopefully get a good hang on using layers and switching between them and so on. But with it condensed down, I'm just going to click on that little drop down, and I'm going to open up layer properties. And so the layer properties is just this window, and I'm just going to drag from a corner to make it a little bit smaller, is where all of the different layers or different types of lines and settings for lines are for my drawing. By default, there is only one layer. It's layer 0, and we cannot get rid of layer 0. It has to be there. But we can make new ones for our drawing. And so to make a new layer, it's either the keyboard shortcut is Alt-N. No, I guess it's not. What is it? Let's hover over it. No, it's saying it's Alt-N. I thought so. There we go. It's Alt-N or this button right here. And then I'm just going to name these A, 1, 2, 3, 4, enter. I'll make a new one. A, 1, 2, 3, A, 1, 2. And what I'm doing is I'm just making layers to just match what I have in this little table here. A, 3, A, 4. And you don't necessarily have to make layer 5 because this is our dimension layer, but I'm just going to make it anyway. Now for the color of our layers, to change the color of them, and by the way, too, if you ever misname one of them, if you do a slow double click, so if you click once, wait like a second, click another time, you can rename it. Or you can right click, rename layer. It also looks like if you hit F2 on your keyboard, you can rename it as well. But for the colors, what I'm going to do is just come over here to this color option, and I'll just click on the color. And for layer 0, or A000, we're going to make it this color number 9, this light gray. For layer 1, we're going to make it yellow. For layer 2, we're going to make it green. And it's a good idea to use these reference colors here because these are also pretty standard across computer screens. Versus with some other colors, you might get a little, it might look a little different on your screen versus mine. Blue, dark gray, and then cyan. And so I've got my colors changed. Now for my line type, all of them are going to remain continuous except for this first layer here, this layer 0. So for that, I'm going to click on the word continuous. go to the load option, because by default, AutoCAD doesn't load different line types in, purely just to save space and make it launch faster. So I'm going to load in line types, and I'm going to scroll down until I see hidden. Okay. And then I'll click on it. Okay. And now this line type is set at hidden. Now I'm going to change my line weights. So I'm going to leave layer 0 as default. For 1, I'm just going to click on that option and I'm going to change it to 0.4. So this is just how thick my different lines are going to come out. I didn't do anything grading wise with your line weights, purely because with hand drawings, and especially how I had you turn them in, it can be a little difficult to control those line weights. And then in your pictures, maybe you did have good line weights and I just couldn't really see it. But with CAD, there's really no excuse for not having the right size lines where you need to, because we can set our layers like this. So line 2, I'm going to set to 0.3. Line 3 to 0.2. 4 to 0.09. And line 5 to 0.2 again. Right? Now, for the next box, the reason why I have it that far along these options is because the plotting option used to be all the way at like the end of this menu, but then they moved it towards the front, so really I should change it in this little table. But this just means if a line would print or not print. So we essentially can put guidelines in our drawings and set those lines to not print out and then not have to delete them at all. But they wouldn't exist in our finalized versions of our drawings. And so to turn a line off to print, you're just going to click on the little printer icon itself, and it will put that little Ghostbuster no symbol there. And so that means, oh wait, no, they've changed it. It's just a circle with a line through it. It used to be that little slash line. But so that means that that layer, anything I draw in layer 0000 is not going to print out. Lastly, in our layer properties, we can have descriptions. And so I'm not necessarily going to make you type descriptions in these little text boxes here, but if I slow click, slow double click, I could just type in what each one of these is and what it does. So again, in your template file for your big project that I'll give you next week, it'll have descriptions of all the lines in there. So this way you can kind of hopefully better understand what each one of them does. Right now, you don't necessarily have to type these descriptions in, but maybe you'll find it helpful to do so. Boom, dimensions. Okay. So now I have all of my layers made. I'm just going to X out of the Layer Properties Manager through this little close button here. If you're on a Mac, it'll just be that thing on the sidebar, and you'll just kind of see it the whole time you're working. So now if I want to switch between layers, I can just switch in this little drop down here, and I could be in the A111 layer. And now if I go into the line tool, my line is yellow. I can't see anything related to line weights, and that's because by default in AutoCAD, they don't have line weights visible, which irks me a little bit, just because that's not how it used to be. But you know, back in my day, yada, 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 there's an easy way to turn it on, and that is LW display. So if you type in LW display, and you can either, since it currently says that it's off, I could type in on, enter, And now I can see different line weights or thicknesses. The other way to do it is to click on your little, I guess hamburger icon is usually what I call it. And you can check off line weight here, which brings the button up down here. And so we can see that button go away or come back. And then you can either click on it to turn it off or turn it on. For this assignment, I'd recommend keeping your line weights on just to kind of help you see the differences with layers a little bit better too, but do however you so choose. All right. And so again, I'm going to just condense my AutoCAD down a little bit. Or, ooh, I've got a better idea. I've got a better idea. We'll do this on the fly. One moment. Oops. Do this. I'm going to take a screenshot of this. One moment. Yep. I'll take a screenshot of this. That little the little pink dot will be in it, but that's just fine. And then in OBS, aha, okay, boom, boom, that's really big. I'll make it a little smaller. Boom, that's good. That's what I'll do. Wow. Okay, and now we'll start with this building. So this one doesn't have a lot of too many descriptors kind of to it. We don't know what the walls are made out of. We can see in the drawing. So if I put my cursor kind of near it, right above where my cursor is, we can see that the walls are 6 inches thick, but we don't have anything necessarily defining those different materials like we do with our small building. We do have tags on our windows and doors, so we can see that where it says that 30/50, that is the way that I'll tag a window, which means that it's 3 feet 0 inches wide, 5 feet 0 inches in height. And the same thing then with the door, where it says 30/68. So for the way I tag them, that's interpreted as 3 feet 0 inches wide, 6 foot 8 inches tall. So just kind of as a little note, but we'll start with our walls. So I'm going to make sure that I'm in the A1 layer, the yellow one, to start my walls. But actually what I'll do is I'm going to purposefully start myself in the wrong layer just so I can show you that if you do it that way, it's okay and it's not the end of the world and you can fix it easily. And I'm going to go into the polyline tool, keyword shortcut PL, enter. And since my units are already set to architectural, I'm just going to start to draw. And I'm going to go 10 feet, enter. And oh no, it's too big to fit on my drawing. So I'm just going to hit escape, and then I can zoom out a bit more. Let me just make sure that it's visible next to the picture. And I'll actually delete that guy. And I'll go back into the polyline tool, click to start my line, 10 feet. So I make sure I'm putting that foot mark, enter, 10 foot down. Let me scroll out and kind of pan myself just so everything is visible on the screen. 10 feet. And then I'll just click on that endpoint to close it and escape to end the command. So the reason why I wanted to do that in polyline instead of line is because it's all one connected piece. Additionally, and let me just hit delete to get rid of it, I could have done a rectangle. And I could do a rectangle here, and I could type in 10 feet, tab, 10 feet, enter. I get the exact same result. More than one way to do it. Now, this might be the point where I realize, oh no, I was in the wrong layer while I was doing that. Does not mean that I have to restart anything by any means. So if you do anything in the wrong layer, you can always just click on it, come to your layer drop down here, and switch it over to the layer that you intended it to be in. So if at any point you forget to switch your layer beforehand, you can just switch it after the fact. As a little note though, we'll see that once I hit escape to deselect this, I went back to whatever layer I was currently drawing in. So you may then want to just go double check that you're in whatever layer you want to be in. So now that I have my overall outside measurement of 10 feet by 10 feet, I'm going to add in my measurements for my wall thickness. And to do that, I'm going to use the offset tool. And so again, offset is right up here, or keyboard shortcut O. And I almost always use offset as through. So you could just type your distance in as 6, enter, and leave it at that. I just always like to leave it at through. So I'm just going to hit enter, click on the object I want to offset, bring it inward, and then type the amount I want, which is 6 inches. So I just need to type in 6. I don't necessarily need to put that inches mark. Enter, and now I have walls that are 6 inches thick. Escape to end the command, and now I can start adding in my windows and doors. So to do those, I'm going to switch my layer over to this 0, 0, this one that's full zeros, because this is my, what we call our def points layer. So it is our guide work. It is the layer that doesn't actually get printed out at all. And so anything we do in here, we can either erase after the fact, we could leave it there after the fact. It's just kind of as for helpful references and guideline work. And now that I'm in this guideline layer, I'm going to go into the line tool, or keyboard shortcut L, and I'm going to draw a line from this corner in 2 foot 6, enter. And I'll just draw a little guideline upward and hit escape to leave the command. And so that then is giving me a nice reference point for my window. And to make my window, what I'm going to do is go into my favorite tool again, offset. So O, enter. I'm going to leave it as this through. So I'll hit enter again. And I'll click on this line. And I'll say I want to bring it over to the right. 1 foot 6, enter. Bring it over to the left. 1 foot 6, enter. And so now I have the edges of my windows. And now I can use the trim tool to cut this down. And I'm actually going to cut the lines out completely there, just because I do want to switch them over to a different layer, and so it's just easier just to have them cut out entirely. Now, because these are in that layer 0, I can just click on them, or I could highlight them using like the cross window, and I'm just going to switch them over to the right layer. Okay, next up, I'll add in the opening for my door. So again, just making sure I'm in this guideline layer. And I'll draw a line from the top of my building, or I guess from the south wall of my building, down 2 foot 6, enter. And I'm just going to bring this line all the way through, because I can use it as a good reference for the window that's on this side. And I'm going to, again, go into my favorite tool, offset, O, enter. Well, actually, trim's my favorite tool, but you know what? We're not playing too many favorites. This time I'll set my distance, so I'll do 1'6" just to show you, whichever way you want to work is fine. Enter, and I'll go up, click on my line, down. And then I'm going to use the trim tool to cut my opening, which, by the way, I had to click here twice because technically it was trimming the gray line first, and then it was going back and trimming the yellow one. So that's why I had to click twice, which is okay. And I'll leave this one here just because depending on how fast I get through this, I might be able to show you how to add in the dimensions and stuff and change those styles. Try not to go too fast, but at the same time, I know that you can just pause me, so what's the harm in me speeding a little bit? I'm just going to click on these lines, switch the layer over to this layer 1, escape, and now I'm ready to start adding in like the features of like my doors and stuff. So my door itself is going to be in that green layer. So I'll switch myself over to layer 2. So this way it's kind of got a medium thickness, not as thick as the walls. And I'll go into my polyline tool. And my door itself is going to be just as wide as the opening. So it's going to be 3 feet. Enter. And then thickness wise is usually going to be about 1.5 inches. There is nothing here that says how thick our door is. We don't have a schedule for our doors or anything. So I'm just going to make it 1.5. And then I could either type in 3 feet, or if I hover over that endpoint without clicking, I can see where they would meet. And then I can just click to connect my endpoints. Or I could have used the rectangle command. Or I could have done it 1.5 trillion other ways. So many different ways to do something in AutoCAD. Now, for our door arc, the way I have it in the drawing is just with that 45-degree line, because I like the 45-degree lines. They're easier. But there's that big hot debate in the architecture community of which is better, the arcs or the lines. And so I'll show you how to do it with a 45-degree line or with an arc. So first I'll switch my layer over to my blue layer, layer 3. And I can go into the line tool and just draw a line from one point to another point. A lot of students don't like the blue layer. I'll agree with it too. The blue layer is very difficult to see on CAD work. There's nothing I can do about that other than choose a different color, I guess, if you really want to. With our big CAD project, choosing a different color is going to really screw up what's called a color plot table, in which the printer reads different colors as different line thicknesses. So when it sees the color yellow, it prints it out with this thickness. When it sees the color fuchsia, it prints it out with another one. So don't mess with the colors in that project, but if the blue really is getting to you that bad, I guess feel free to pick a different color. But so that's how you would do it with a line. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Hopefully didn't, blow anyone's mind there. With an arc, what I would do is a start-end direction or a start-end angle. And so with a start-end direction, we can say I want it to start here, end here, and then come straight out this way. And then it puts a nice, even quarter circle arc there. Or start end angle to say I want to start here, end here, and then what would I do for angle? Or actually, would I do it the opposite way? Hold on, let me hit escape. Start end angle, start here, end here, and then yeah, I would give it an angle of 90 degrees. I'd get the same end result, but also that 45-degree line, it works just fine. We'll go over something too called blocks, in which we can get these reusable pieces of content and just plop them in our drawings to make things nice and easier, so you can just find a door and download it and put it in your drawing, and no one will be the wiser. Okay. Next up too is I'm just going to add in a little line here, which helps symbolize that this is an exterior door. Sometimes it also is like a little bump out piece. I just realized my cursor is getting a little covered, but that's okay. A little bump out piece there just to show that it's an exterior door. But I'm just going to leave it as a little blue line. And then I'll start working on my windows. So for our windows, I'm going to go into my green layer, my layer 2. And I'm first going to just start to build out a little bit of the frame. And so I'll come out, you know, like 2 inches out. And I could either type in 6 inches over, or again, I can hover over that endpoint, click to place it, and then click to adhere. And I'll even show you a couple of other modify commands today that I wasn't planning on doing until next week, but we'll do them today. So this way we can see some shortcuts. And then I'll switch my layer over to this A4, this dark gray one, and I'll just draw one line that goes all the way from this end down to this middle piece. And I'll hit escape and use one of my favorite commands again, offset. And this time I'm going to make my offset distance as through. And I'm just going to offset it in about a 1/2 inch so this is like my window pane itself, my piece of glass, which probably would be even thinner than a 1/2 inch, but hey. Then for those blue lines in the middle, we'll go in 2. From this one, we'll go in another, not 2, a 1. And then for this one, I can also just click on it and go directly to an endpoint and then bring it in a 1/2 inch on this side. So this is just kind of setting up my window pane, or my window symbol rather. I'll click on these 2 lines and switch them over to the blue layer. And then I'll use the trim tool to cut some of them down. So that way now I've got half of my window made. And now I can actually use the mirror tool to make a just flipped copy on this half rather than have to go draw all that out again. Not that that was difficult to draw out. It was 3 lines, but you know, maybe I'm just feeling super lazy. So I'm just going to highlight all of that with my selection tool. And now the keyboard shortcut for mirror is MI, or it's located right up here. And it's asking me to draw a mirror line. So a line I want to flip it across, which I'm just going to do it across itself down here. Bring my cursor out towards either side. It doesn't really matter as long as I'm perfectly horizontal. And now it's asking, do I want to erase the original? And so I'm going to say, no, I don't. And now I've got my window. So next is I'm going to click on all of this window stuff again and just highlight all of it, because I have that other window down here that I don't want to have to draw again. because once again, I'm being just super lazy. I don't want to draw all of that again. I already did it all up here. And so what I'm going to do then is copy it. So I'm going to copy, pick somewhere to grab it by. In this case, it doesn't really matter where I picked as my base point to grab it by. And I'll just put it like down here. Escape to end the command. Highlight it all again. And this time I'll rotate it. Pick a place to grab it by, which again, not going to matter too much for me. And I just want to flip it so that way it's now horizontal. And then one last time, select the whole thing again. This time, move. And now it is going to matter where I grab it by. So I'm going to grab it by this top part. So that way I have an endpoint I have it from and where I want to put it. Now I probably could have copied it and rotated it directly in place, but honestly I didn't find moving that extra one command of move to be that cumbersome. So, but if you wanted to copy it directly into place, I suppose you could. And last few things is we've got to add in our porch. And so our porch is going to be in that blue layer again. So I'm going to switch my layer over to this layer 3. Go into the polyline tool. And our porch is 3 feet deep. And all together is 5 feet long. And then over. And escape to end the command. And I have, well, I almost have. Hold on, I still need to actually add in my hatch. And then I've got my floor plan done. And then we'll move on to the elevation. And so I'm going to switch my layer over to layer A04, which is my hatching layer. And I'm going to go into the hatch tool, which is right up here, or keyboard shortcut H. I want to do a solid hatch. And this is, again, if you forgot to change your layer, I really don't recommend choosing a different color here. I instead would advise you to come to Properties and change your layer in this drop down. I know the picture is a little bit in the way, but you can at least see how I got there. And change your layer to like layer 4. Just because it's really easy to think you have the right color and not. And when it comes to a color plot table, that's going to be what really kind of gets you. And I'm just going to click in these walls. And remember I said that I kind of recommend you do each one individually. I know I just broke that rule, but for this one, I know that there aren't going to be any changes made to this building, so I'll just hatch all 3 of those walls areas at the same time and hit escape. And I've got that floor plan good to go. I'm going to leave this line here just because at the end of the video, I'll show you how to do the dimensions, which you can add to your drawing for extra credit. And so I could use that line to help me make my center lines and everything. So I'm going to leave that line there temporarily. But now I'm going to move on to creating my elevation views. And so let me switch the picture in OBS. Okay. All right. So we are going to do this, well, I guess that would be the south wall. That'd be the north wall. My south elevation here. We've got some information in our drawing telling us, like how thick the floor is, which it got cut off in my picture, but I want to say that's 6 inches. Let me just double check. Yes. And we have what like the pitch of our roof is. We have the thickness of our roof material. So we've got we have all of the information that we would need to make it. Now I could switch my layer over to this A00, and I could use those construction lines that I spoke about last class. So again, and I know, actually no, the picture isn't covering it. It's this button right here, or keyboard shortcut XL. And so I made sure I was in layer, this kind of guideline construction layer. And I could just draw guidelines down from that edge, escape to end the command. Because it was the very last command I used as well, if I just hit enter or space, it brings me right back into it. And so I've got my opening, and I've got like where my window would go. The other thing I could do is that technique in which I go into the line tool, I hover over without clicking on it, and then I can click, and this is where like I could start doing everything. So those are the two kind of options I could go with. I personally do like construction lines, so I am going to leave construction lines here just because, you know, it's what I like. You don't have to like it. Oops, I went back into the command by accident. And so now I have just like the overall side to side, and I'll go into the line tool and just hover over that point up there. And so that way I can kind of just start my line down here, and then I'm going to go up. Well, actually, I'll use the offset tool. So I'll go into offset again. I'll leave it set as through, enter, and I'm going to go up 6 inches, so I don't have to put that little quotation mark, because it'll automatically read it as inches. Up 2 feet, up 5 feet, then I'm actually just going to go from the bottom of my floor again, up 8 feet, and then up 1 foot. So this is the start of my building and my roof. And I'll go into the trim tool, which is keyboard shortcut TR, enter. And I'm going to just trim the guidelines over there, which also, if you don't click directly on a line when you trim, so if I just click over here, I can just drag my cursor through everything I want to trim through. Trim, 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 trim. And we're trimming. Excuse me. I tried to cover the mic for that one. And so I've got my window, the start of my roof, my walls, everything. I'll hit escape to exit the command. And then I'll just come up here and highlight all of those construction lines and delete them. Technically, I could keep them there. They wouldn't be doing anything. But ultimately, I don't know, I think they would just make the drawing kind of uglier. Like just looking at it in AutoCAD, printing it out, it wouldn't have any bearing, but looking at it in AutoCAD would be uglier. So now I'm just going to switch the layers of some of these lines. So for these exterior walls, I'm going to switch them over to layer 2. For this one, I'm going to switch it over to layer 3, and I actually need it to be some pretty big dashes. And for that, and I'm actually going to move my little drawing over here off screen for a bit just so we can see it. I need to click on it, right click, properties, And so this then brings up that properties bar, which, like I said, starts off kind of as big and in the way up here, but you can just drag it to be directly on the side. For those of you in the Mac version, I am 96% sure, so pretty confident, that your properties bar is just always here permanently in this like bottom area. But in my properties bar, I'm just going to change for just this line, I'm going to change its line type to be hidden, and then I'm going to change its line type scale to be much larger than 1. I'm probably going to want it to be not even 5. 48? 48. That's what I figured. That's typically, I often am using multiples of 12 when it comes to these scale things, so that's how I guessed pretty accurately. Another way we can change it too, so maybe I do only want it to be, you know, like a scale of 12. The other way we can change it is right down here, we can adjust our annotation scale. So I can say I want my scale to be 1/4 inch equals a foot. And then I can type in the command regen to refresh everything, which refreshed all of my lines. So now we can see that these hidden lines that our layer 0 is in got much bigger. And so actually then I'd want this to be set with a line type scale of 1, technically. And it's exactly what I want it to be. So I could either switch this here to be 48, or I could come down here and switch my annotative scale. Either way, once again, I'm going to get the same end result. I'm going to switch my window as well to the blue layer, because that is just the rough opening from edge to edge, and then I can add in the frames and stuff with my offset tool. This line actually isn't going to stay here, which, whoops, let me bring this picture back. Whoops, hold on. There we go. And I'll just leave my properties bar open next to it. I am going to leave this line here just because it'll help me reference for my roof and stuff. And I guess that's what I can do now, is I can add in my roof. Or, hold on, let me just switch this over to my blue layer. And I'll switch this one to my yellow layer. And I'm actually going to take these grips on it, and I'm just going to pull it out to be further. There isn't any rule necessarily of how far they need to be stretched out to. Purely because this represents the ground line, and the ground line is going on continuously. So there isn't any specific rule or number of how far you need to make that line go out. And now I'll start adding in my roof. I want to make sure that it's not getting covered by this picture. So I'm going to switch my layer over to my green one, and my roof has a pitch of 10/12. So that means for every 10 inches I go up, I go 12 inches over. 10 inches up, 12 inches over. 10 up. Oops, I didn't. 10 up, 12 over. So this is one way I could absolutely do it, is just kind of mark out, oops, I meant to go 10 up, not 12 up. Little staircases going in one direction, and then go back into the line tool and do little staircases in the other direction, which if I could type the correct numbers in, so Control Z, that'd be great. And then I've got my roof slope one way I could do it. Another way I could do it, so let me just undo. Actually, hold on, let me redo just to get this one back here. Is I could take these lines here and use that mirror tool that I used for the windows. Again, that's up here, or keyboard shortcut MI, to make a flipped copy of it on the other side, and then connect the dots. Do I want to erase my original? No, I don't. Or I could draw a line that goes up 10 feet over 12 feet. And then another line. Actually, no, because that's gonna, I guess I can have a meet at the midpoints. Up. Oh, never mind. Hold on. I remember what I'm supposed to do. Sorry, guys. I had a brain fart. But still, I make a line that goes up 10 feet, over 12 feet, and then connect, escape to end the command, go back into the line tool, and then from the other side, up 10 feet, over 12 feet, connect the dots, and then trim everything, because that would be where my ultimate roof pitch sits. So either way, whichever way you choose to do it, you're gonna get the same end result. And I'll just click on these guys and delete them. It's just whichever way you really want to work through it. I'll use the offset tool, and I'll keep it set as through to just make a parallel copy of this in line with that, parallel copy in line with there. And then we'll also use another tool that is brand new for us, which I could just pull at the grips, but I'm actually going to use the extend tool, which will make it go meet. So extend brings lines to meet each other versus trim cuts lines. So trim will take these lines and cut them. Extend brings lines to go meet at different places. Now I can take this one, delete it. I'll take this part, or these two lines, and I'm going to switch them over to the blue layer. I've got to also draw in my porch. I'll switch myself over to the blue layer, and I'll go into the polyline tool, and my porch comes out 3 feet, and then just down to meet the ground line. And then, do I want to do my window or my hatching? My window or my hatching? What to do, what to do? I'll do the window first. So for the window, I'm going to use the offset tool. Since I have these as separate lines, which is kind of annoying to offset everything then, what I can actually do is use a command to make them all into one piece. So if I highlight the whole thing, I can use the command join, which is just shortcut J, enter. And now it's all one piece, so it's pretty much like I drew it with the polyline tool, but it's just, because since I didn't originally, I just told AutoCAD, hey, make those all into one piece as if it was a polyline. And then I'll go into the offset tool. I'll use it set as through again. And I'm just going to offset in a little bit for my frame, probably about 2 inches in, and then maybe like another inch in. Escape. And I'm going to change this one over to the green layer. Any other details that we would have in here would be done in this layer 4, the dark gray. And so this is where I might want to go into the line tool and just kind of freehand in some shiny windows, which again, I could also offset this little window shine just because I want them to be parallel. And then I'll click on the grips so that way they're still parallel to each other, but they're not perfectly in line with each other. And I'll add in to little like framing details. So just in the line tool, escape to end it. And remember, AutoCAD, if you just hit enter, will just bring you back into the very last command you ever used. Now, technically, this would have my windowsill down here. And so, like, this wouldn't be a full-on frame, but we're just going to pretend. Just because, you know, this is our first AutoCAD project. We're not professionals yet. We're getting there. And then while I'm still in this layer 4, I'm going to go into the hatch command. I'm going to have my hatch as this ANSI 33. So ANSI stands for the American National Standards Institute. They come up with the kind of rules of what hatch patterns get used for what materials. And I don't really know what the number system stands for, to be honest, but that's kind of unimportant. But I'm just going to use this one. And I'm going to hatch in this area and this area. And before I X out, I want to make sure I've got my scale set. And let me just double check the instructions if I tell you the exact scale to set it for. No, I didn't think so. I just wanted to check. But it's probably going to be either 48 or 24. Yep, 48. And an angle to set it at 2, which, since it's at a 45-degree angle, if I rotate it 45 degrees, it's going to make it vertical. And so then if I rotate it 135 degrees, it'll make it horizontal. And you can also just pull at this slider here to move them around if you want to. But you want a scale of 48 and an angle of 135. Close. And so that would be, to get full credit for this assignment, this would be the minimum of what you need to do. Not that this isn't, you know, especially as a starting out, not that this wasn't hard for you, and hard CAD work is always relative. Some people are really good at it. Some people just, it takes them longer to do, and that's okay. But for this assignment, this would be full credit so far. Or not so far, period. Make sure when you save your work, so you're going to click on one of the save options. I always like to go with the save as, the one with the little pencil next to it. Make sure you are saving it somewhere where you know how to find it, where you can access it. So either save it to your flash drive, your desktop, My Documents. I don't care where you save it, just make sure you know where you're saving it to. So I'll put mine in this AutoCAD one. What is this? 3D print butt? Oh, that was from the butt of a shotgun that I had to replace for someone. I was just like, what is that? Anywho, now I digress. And so for your file name, and this is something that I'm really, please do this for your files, because it makes it so much easier on me when I'm grading things, is your file name should be Tech1728 dash your last name in all caps, your first name lowercase, and then underscore, and I believe I asked for it to be called first practice. It is going to be easier for you to find your files if you actually name them things that you know what you save them as, but it really makes it so much easier for me to know whose work I'm looking at if your name is in the file type. And so for the hand drawing assignment, I got a lot of things where it was just called like cam scan or just like picture or just like image 1, image 2. And I get that maybe it's a little harder on your ends to change them, but if you name your files something that you know what it is and it has your name in it, it makes it so much easier for both you and me. And just having a good file naming practice and saving your work, it's just really step one of being a good designer and working well with computers. So please at least have your name somewhere in that file so I can find it. Please, please, please. Please. And then we can save it. So it has up here, it's telling me that it's saved in my, it's saved, this is my flash drive or which port it's plugged in on my computer, the folder that it's saved in, the file name. So make sure you are saving your work. Now, if you're interested in how to add in dimensions and stuff, that is what I'm going to show you for this next part. You will have to put dimensions in your big project, so it may not hurt to do them now as some practice and guidance. And if you do add dimensions into your drawings, I will give you some extra credit points for it as well. So with that, if I go to add dimensions in, and I'm gonna remove this little image for now, just because we don't need it anymore, really. If I go to add dimensions in, I'm gonna do that here using the dimension tools. There is a whole toolbar just for annotation, but we don't need to get into that too much, just because they have transitioned it to also being on that home tab. This is the quick dimension tool, and then we also have the ability to add in our own specific dimensions. If quick dimension isn't doing exactly what we want it to, we can kind of override some of the things that it does. The first thing you're going to notice when you go to place a dimension should be this. So I'm clicked on this line, I click to place it. Oh my goodness, it's very small and it's written in decimals. That's because our dimension styles are not set. So the first thing we'd have to do is set our dimension style. So to do that, I'm going to type in the command DIMSTY. All one word, enter. And that brings up this menu here. Again, in your big project template, it's going to have a dimension style already preloaded in. You'll just have to double click on it in this menu here. But for this, we're going to have to make our own little one with some changes to it. So I'm going to modify the standard style in this drawing. And in this primary units tab, I'm going to change my units to architectural. Now, in my symbols and arrows, I'm going to change my arrowheads to, instead of being closed arrowheads, I'm actually going to click on it and change it to be architectural tick marks. And I'm going to change that arrow size to, instead of being 3/16 in size, I'm going to make it 4 inches. Which it's going to look crazy over here for now, but don't worry about it. I'm also going to change the dimension break to just be about 3-ish inches. And I want to just make sure if there's anything other in here that I want to change, which I should be good. Then for my text size, I'm going to change this again. Instead of being 3/16, I'm going to make it 6 inches. So that way my text is just going to be a little bit bigger. Anywhere between like 4 to 6 inches is a good idea for your drawings. And then for my fit, I don't want to change anything there. My primary units are good. In the lines tab then, in this offset for origin, I'm going to change it to be 4 inches as well. So that is just going to change how much of a break is between my extension line and the object that it's dimensioning. And I'm going to change this extend beyond the ticks to be like 3 or 4 as well. Let's do 3. 3, enter. Just so it goes a little bit above, it should. Okay, so with that, in the lines one, I changed this extend beyond the ticks to 3 inches and this offset from origin to 4. In symbols and arrows, I changed it to architectural ticks that had an arrow size of 4 and a break size of 3. So that changes how much of a break just between my text and what it's measuring. In the text tab itself, I didn't change anything with the font. I could if I wanted to. So I can come in here and I can change it to a different font if I really wanted to. Country Blueprint and City Blueprint are some standard good ones for architectural drawings that are loaded in on almost any computer. But I just left it as standard and I just changed the height to 6 inches. And then primary units I set to architectural, and I'm going to leave the precision alone. And I'll click on OK, and I'll click on close. And now we see that this number A is legible and that I have those architectural ticks. I've got that break and everything is working out nice and dandy. Button-wise, for dimension style, if you are someone who really likes toolbar buttons, if you go into the Annotate tab and then click on this little corner arrow, for some reason, that is the button for dimension styles. Don't know why. That's it, but it brings us to the same thing. So anywho, I'm going to change my layer over to layer 5, this cyan one, because this is my dimension layer. And this then is where I can start adding in different dimensions. So you can use this quick dimension tool, which if I go into this, it'll automatically assume what I want to dimension. And so it's saying, hey, do you want to place the dimension here that this is 10 feet? And I can click on it to say, yes, I do. And then I can move my mouse around and then click to place it. One of the issues that students tend to have with quick dimension is when it comes to things for windows and stuff, because it doesn't know to do automatically to the middle of that window. So it's doing all of these weird little measurements and things, which is why then you can click to a center. So I can click from an endpoint to, in this case, the endpoint of this mirrored line and click to place it. Again, it's not going to be able to read perfectly that this is 10 feet because I have this window break in here. So that's why I can click to go from one endpoint, click to go to another endpoint, and then click to place it. Same thing over here is I can click from one endpoint. And let's say I didn't mirror this window. Let's say I did have this all as one perfect line. So I'm going to actually delete those 2 lines and then just move them so it's all one big line rather than 2. And so therefore I wouldn't have an endpoint necessarily to grab by. That's when I could go into the dimension tool and say I want to go from this endpoint, and I could shift right click to the middle, and then it'll give me the snap for the middle of that. I personally don't really like the quick dimension, and I think once again this is one of the things where it was just a new feature that came after I had already learned AutoCAD and after I'd already gotten very good at AutoCAD. So I became familiar with just using these basic ones where you would just define beforehand if you wanted to do a linear dimension or an aligned dimension, or if you were looking for a radius or a diameter. So the way these work is I could do the linear tool, and then I could just say I want to go from one endpoint to another endpoint, and then click to place it. The nice thing too with dimensions is you can click on them after the fact and you can move them around. So I can move this to go to a different spot. So if you place the dimension and you accidentally mess something up, you could easily change it after the fact. And so that's how the dimension tool works. So if you wanted to go through for some extra credit points and place your dimensions, essentially you have to just put all the dimensions, or you would put, you don't have to do anything in life, but you would put all of the dimensions that exist in the drawings that were provided to you. If dimensions can't fit inside a piece or text, then they'll tend to pop up like to the side or above it. And so I could click on that endpoint too and I can move it. So I could say like, no, I don't want it above it. I want it underneath. And I could say I want a dimension from here to here. And again too, so after I click where I want one to be and then the other one, I can get them to be lined up with each other by just like clicking on endpoints. So whoops, I did not align those at all. So I'll just zoom in to stretch it. And so this way I can get them to be nice and lined up with each other. I'm also going to go in and change my dim style setting so that this way the trailing, it does give me the 0 inches. So I'm going to go back into DIMSTY, modify. No, I don't want 0 suppression. 0 suppression. Don't delete the 0 inches. I'm also going to change my fit to be, or would that be in here? Text placement, above, horizontal, right? That did not make it go above, but at least it has that 0 inches because that was going to bug me. And that's how the dimension tool works. So you could add in some dimensions to your drawings for extra credit. Oh, also, like for example, for the center line that's going through here, it's not centered. So I can just change its layer to this layer 4 one. And I could either override its line type here, or I can also come into my properties up here and I can load in an other type of line, load, center, okay, change it to a center line, and switch it over. And I could extend it to be longer or shorter based on those grippies. And if I don't like the line type scale that it's in, this just manually changes for just the one line you currently have selected. So this does not change the scale for all of the lines in your drawing. This just changes whatever you currently have selected. This down here changes it for your entire drawing. So just kind of keep that in mind of which ones you want to use and where. And same thing for that hidden line going down the middle. Just kind of keep in mind what types of lines you're using and where. But you can add those dimensions, like I said, for extra credit. If you want to do any of the other elevations or the section view, those can also be extra credit. And the extra credit will just kind of get tagged onto your overall grade. So it's not necessarily only going to affect, your grade for progress assignments or things like that. So if maybe you lost a bunch of points from hand drawing assignments, or maybe you're anticipating losing points with the SketchUp work or any of the other work, which I would not recommend you anticipate that, but you never know. Never hurts to have extra points in the bank. And that's it from me. If you have questions, please email me, come to office hours, especially when it comes to AutoCAD. I will just record demo answers to questions because it's way easier and way more helpful. than trying to type out an explanation of how you would do it in AutoCAD. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a wonderful week.